Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you to everyone for joining. It looks like we have everyone in from the waiting room. It's such a pleasure to be connected with all of you today. And thank you for being a part of the GEF Global Biodiversity Framework Early Action Support Project. Welcome to the 10th webinar in our series where we're focusing on using spatial data to support the development of plans for national monitoring systems for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. My name is Annie Vernick, and I'm a strategic advisor on science and policy at UNDP. And more importantly for today, I'm lead for UNDP's work around Component 2, and I will be your facilitator for today's session. Today, I'm coming to you from a very sunny New York City. So today's webinar will focus on the technical support package available through Component 2 of the EAS project, with a focus on our newly launched products around spatial data. Next slide. So in particular, this webinar aims to provide concrete recommendations based on the GBF monitoring framework established on Decision 15.5 and the work of the Ad Hoc Technical Expert Working Group on Indicators, or the ATEG on Indicators. Our goal here is to support parties to identify spatial data for indicator calculation as part of a national monitoring system plan. So to do this, our presentations today will introduce our new technical guidance on using spatial data to support national monitoring systems. We'll also launch our GBF monitoring framework data collection on the UN Biodiversity Lab spatial data platform. And finally, we'll highlight additional resources available through UNVL to support parties in your work around the GBF. As always with these sessions, we aim for this to be an open and dynamic space for engagement across all of our speakers and presenters. Next slide. All right, you can see the detailed agenda for the session here, and we'll have interactive activities throughout the presentations and time for question and answers after each presenter. Next slide. So we're all Zoom experts now after 4 years of this, but I want to provide some brief reminders to you. So if you have any technical issues at all, please contact my colleague Leah Phillips. You can send her a private Zoom message in the chat and she'll help you to resolve them. Second, your microphones will be muted to help ensure that everyone can hear our speakers clearly. Third, we do really encourage your active participation. So to ask a question, you have two options. Either you can type your questions in the Zoom chat box as they come up during the presentation, or you can virtually raise your hand in the control panel. We'll then ask you to open your mic during the Q&A session. All right, finally, we have a webinar webpage where you can access today's presentations and recordings. We'll also share them by email after the session concludes. My colleague is sharing the link to that page, and you can also access all of our past webinars in this series on the NBSAP forum. We'll share that link in the chat as well. Next slide. Oh, before we do dive into the presentations, we did want to see who we have with us here today. So we'd love if you could enter your name and what country you're joining us from into the chat, just to see who we have with us today in the room. So I encourage you to do that so everyone can see who's here and we can get a sense. As you're all doing that, I think we can start to move into our first presentation. So I see some responses coming in the chat. Keep them coming. While you're doing that, I will turn it over to our first presenter. So we'll start with a presentation on our technical guidance on developing national data and monitoring systems. This pre-recorded presentation will be given by our colleague Philip Bubb at UNEP WCMC. As Philip has already introduced this technical guidance in previous webinars, he'll give just a brief overview of the guidance, and he'll focus on providing update on the progress of the ad hoc technical expert working group on indicators. So Philip, over to you.
Hello, my name is Philip Bubb and I am the Capacity Development Lead at UNEP Wildlife Conservation Monitoring Centre. And I'm going to introduce in this presentation guidance that we have been producing to support the development of national monitoring system plans and some additional information sources for this work. And the following presentations in this webinar on the use of spatial data will complement these materials. To support component 2 of the GEF Early Action Support Project, so we've been producing this guidance document to assist planning development of national monitoring systems as part of NBSAP revision and alignment with the Global Biodiversity Framework. And the guidance document will be available on the NBSAP forum and sent to you in the next few weeks, with versions in French, Spanish and Russian. And the sections of this guidance include how to use it, an introduction to the monitoring framework, useful terms and suggested steps to produce a monitoring system action plan, an indicator specification template as a useful tool for this work, and relevant information sources. And as you know, COP15 adopted a monitoring framework for the GBF, including headline indicators for use in planning and reporting, and optional component and complementary indicators. And to further develop the monitoring framework and provide guidance on the indicators, COP15 also established an RTEC on indicators. And this group has just published its report for the Substar 26 meeting next month. And the RTEC have produced an information document 14 for Substar 26, which is the guidance we've all been waiting for on using the framework and its indicators. And it includes guidance on using the monitoring framework with the cross-cutting considerations of the GBF, such as the contributions and rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities, gender, and the ecosystem approach. Section 3 is the metadata on the headline and binary indicators, with descriptions and information on the indicators. The RTEC also provided information for document 2 of Substar 26 on the monitoring framework, which includes an annex with a table of all the proposed indicators for the monitoring framework, with hyperlinks to information sources for the component and complementary indicators. There's also a series of 20 webinars on guidance on the monitoring framework, including a report on the process and outcomes of the RTEC on indicators and webinars on indicators for specific GBF targets. And an information workshop on the work of the RTEC will be held on the Saturday before Substar 26. Information on the indicators in the monitoring framework is also available on this webpage, produced by UNEP WCMC, and which will be updated as required, including after Substar 26 and COP16. This will be the portal for all resources on monitoring from the RTEC and Secretariat of the CBD. The guidance for developing a national monitoring system action plan includes suggested steps, which are organised in 4 stages. Number 1, prepare a project approach or workflow to produce a monitoring system action plan. 2, define the indicators for each NBSAP goal or target. 3, produce for each NBSAP indicator a delivery plan. And 4, compile a national monitoring system action plan for all the NBSAP targets and indicators. Thank you for your attention, and the UNEP WCMC Nature Indicators team welcomes your questions for technical support on developing monitoring system plans, and we can be contacted at this email address.
All right, sending thanks to Philip across the ocean. And just to note that some of the updates that Philip provided from the RTEC on indicators we'll cover in a little bit more detail in some of our following presentations. But if anyone has questions right now, please do feel free to raise your hand or add your questions to the chat. We'll try our best to answer them across the rest of the presenters who are here, or to connect you directly to Philip to ask following the session. So I'll give just a few moments. Please feel free to raise your hand or drop anything into the chat. Right. I'm not seeing anything so far. If anything comes up, do go ahead and drop it into the chat and we can cover any questions after the next presentation. So let's continue on then with our next presentation, which is the launch of our new technical guidance on using spatial data to support the development of plans for national monitoring systems. I will be presenting this today, so you're stuck with me for a little bit longer. And it looks like we have it up on the screen. So let's dive in. Alexi, you can move to the next slide. All right, so in this presentation, I'll start out with an overview of our goal behind creating this guidance document. And specifically, I'll summarize the information that we provide in section 2 of the guidance around supporting national assessments of spatial data capacity and needs for developing national monitoring plans for the GBF. I'll also provide a quick overview of section 3, which focuses on our UN Biodiversity Lab spatial data platform. We'll also hear more about this in our final presentation of today's session. And finally, I'll highlight some key differences between this guidance document and other guidance documents which we've produced through the EAS project. Next slide. All right, so why another guidance for component 2? We've just heard from Philip about the first product released to support countries in their work around component 2, which provides a comprehensive picture of the steps needed to develop a plan for a national monitoring system. This is the publication you see on the left in this slide. Our new guidance on the right aims to be complementary, focusing specifically on the use of spatial data as part of a plan for a national monitoring system. We've heard from many parties that they need support to build capacity to develop their monitoring systems and to evaluate indicators under the monitoring framework. Our goal with this guidance is to provide the support, specifically for indicators that can be calculated using spatial data. Next slide. So parties can use this document to first review indicators that require spatial data for their calculation. Second, identify, view, and download global spatial data officially recommended for calculation of the indicator. And third, access checklists and guidance to identify existing national spatial data, as well as national data gaps. We'll share the link to the guidance in the chat and also with you over email following this session. Next slide. So this guidance has 3 main sections, which you can see on the left. First, a brief introduction to the monitoring framework and to the guidance as a whole. Second, a section on assessing national spatial data capacity and needs. And third, a section on current and forthcoming features on our UN Biodiversity Lab spatial data platform that can support parties in your work around the GBF. So in this presentation, as I noted, and Alexi, if you just click, I will focus on section 2 around assessing national spatial data capacity and needs. Next slide. So before I dive into the details, let me take a step back and ask, why spatial data? Why is this important? As we look towards rapidly taking action around the GBF, spatial data can support us to identify where and how to take effective action that delivers across the key issues of our time. They can likewise play a powerful role in monitoring progress towards the ambitious international targets of the GBF. And perhaps most importantly for our work through the EAS project, The monitoring framework of the GBF includes many indicators that will require or can use spatial data to be calculated. Next slide. So drawing from this bigger picture, in section 2 of the guidance, we address 4 key questions to support countries to identify where and how spatial data can be used as part of the national monitoring system for the GBF. So first we ask, what indicators need spatial data to be calculated? Second, how can parties identify national spatial data for indicator calculation? Third, what global spatial data can be used when national data are not available? And fourth, how can parties combine national and global data to use at the national level? So we provide more information on the responses to all of these questions in the guidance, and today I'll try to provide a brief introduction of each. So let's start with the indicators that need spatial data to be calculated. Next slide. So we followed a rigorous approach in assessing which indicators require or encourage the use of spatial data in their calculation. What did we find? I know you're waiting with bated breath. So we found that 44% of the headline indicators and 50% of the component indicators have methodology encouraging the use of spatial data. Why is this important? Essentially, this analysis shows us that spatial data is critical to monitoring and reporting on national action to achieve the GBF. We'll unpack the methods behind this analysis and the details of the results a little bit further in the next presentation, and you can also read more about it in the guidance. Next slide. All right, so we know from that analysis that spatial data will be an essential part of a national monitoring system for the GBF. In section 2.2 of the guidance, we provide a series of resources designed to support parties to identify spatial data for the calculation of indicators at the national level. We start out in section 2.2.1 by providing overall guidance on identifying national spatial data for indicator calculation and assessing the utility of global spatial data at the national level. So this section includes a checklist for assessing national spatial data availability and gaps, as well as general questions to support countries to assess data availability and data quality at the national level. Next slide. All right, so I know there's a whole lot of text on this slide and you can't see the screenshot well. Don't worry, I'll walk you all through it in detail. So in section 2.2.2, we get into the heart of our data in the guidance. Here we link to data tables for headline, component, and complementary indicators that can be calculated with spatial data, along with global reference data for the calculation of each of these indicators. I won't go into much detail about these data here, as we'll cover them in much more detail in the next presentation, but I do want to highlight a few things. So overall, our goal with these tables was to review and summarize the information available through Decision 15.5 and its metadata to provide parties with a standard to review their own national data against and to identify global data to fill gaps. To do this, first, we captured key information about each indicator and the data recommended to calculate it in the table. This is what you're seeing in all of the columns on the left-hand side of the table. We also provided guiding questions to support parties to identify if better data exists or can be produced at the national level. You see that in the far right-hand column in the screenshot on the slide. The data that are linked in this table are also available through our data collection on the GBF monitoring framework on UN Biodiversity Lab, And we'll hear a little bit more about that in our next presentation. Next slide. All right, so in section 2.2.3, we then explore how national and global data sets could be combined for use. Generally, it's preferable to use a single, consistent, validated data set to meet any data need. However, there may be cases when a national data set is preferable, but it doesn't provide data coverage for the whole country. This section therefore provides an overview of some of the considerations and data processing requirements that you should consider when combining global and national data in a country. Next slide. All right, finally, in section 2.2.4, we provide information on how parties may be able to validate global data sets for national use, if desired. Here we look at both scientific validation and institutional validation of global data for national use. These processes are often interlinked, and the process varies completely country to country, but we provide some general recommendations around this process. Next slide. All right, so in the third and final section of the guidance, we highlight new and forthcoming features available through UNBL to support work around the GBF. You can see the major sections on this slide, but I won't go into detail here as we'll hear more about this in our final presentation of the day. Next slide. So, very important, all of the information in this guidance document has been produced based on Decision 15.5 and the associated metadata available through the Kunming Montreal GBF Indicators website as of December 2023. With the release of the new materials by the ATEG on indicators that Philip just introed, we'll conduct an update following the decisions reached at SBSTA 26, which we plan to release in July of this year. We'll also update as needed following the relevant decisions at COP16. Next slide. All right, so before I wrap up, I'd just like to highlight some key differences between the different spatial data products that you'll have access to through the EAS project. The guidance I just shared, as well as the other spatial products we're discussing through this webinar, are comprehensively aligned with the GBF monitoring framework and the ongoing work of the ATEG on indicators. They're designed to support parties in your work to include spatial data in your plans for national monitoring systems in your country. The spatial products we produce through component 3, which you can see on the right, draw on validated scientific research around spatial planning and prioritization to support nature-based actions for policy alignment. However, these products are not yet comprehensively aligned to the GBF monitoring framework. In the future, we hope to bring these products together to offer comprehensive support around planning, monitoring, and reporting for the GBF that's fully aligned with the monitoring framework. But for now, the products are separated in this way to give you access to the materials that are most useful to you. Next slide. All right, so I've just thrown a whole ton of information at you, and I'd like to pause and hear from you and get your input. So I'd like to ask what support is most relevant for your country. You should see in just a moment a Zoom poll popping up on your screen. Let's give it just a moment. All right, there it is. So you can select one or multiple options here. And we're really curious to hear from all of our participants about which of these types of support is most relevant for you. So I'll give everyone just a moment. I don't see any answers yet. Don't be shy. All right, we've got a couple coming in. A couple more. So it looks like our top responses today are connecting to a national data repository to bring together national and global data, and creating maps for the national report and the NBSAP. There's also quite a bit of interest in accessing and downloading global spatial data sets. All right, thank you everyone for your participation in the poll. I'd also like to mention before I wrap up that the CBD Secretariat has shared a survey on capacity needs with parties. This is still open, and the Secretariat and UNEP WCMC would love to get more input from parties. My colleague is dropping the link to this poll into the chat, and we encourage you to participate if you're able. So next slide. All right, so that is it for me. I will say thank you very much to all of you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions now about all of the information I just presented. If anyone has any questions that's come up on Philip's presentation, we're happy to take those as well. So the floor is open. As a reminder, you can raise your hand or drop a question into the chat.
Annie?
Yes.
I think there's also an opportunity. I'm just noting that I am the technical support person here. I'm noting that I accidentally clicked the poll for later on. So if we wanted to, we could rerun the poll for this presentation, or we can just take a little detour and do it later. Apologies on that.
That's okay. Let's take a little detour and do it later. The polls we have throughout are kind of interwoven with the various support we're offering, so I think that's totally fine.
Okay. Thanks all.
Let's see. All right, I guess while we're waiting for questions to come in, I will just say I'd like to highlight that I mentioned that we'll do an update cycle following the outcome of Substed 26. So just so you're aware, the updated recommendations for the ATEG will mean basically two things for the material in this guidance. So first, we'll need to update the analysis showing the percentage of indicators that require spatial data. The exact numbers will likely change, but the fact that spatial data will be incredibly important to monitoring and reporting under the GBF will not change. Second, we'll also be updating that data table I showed you in section 2.2.2 to include any updates based on the global reference data. And we'll have a chance to talk about this in more detail in the next presentation. So I'm not seeing any questions coming in at this point. Oh, I do see one. So the question is how to elaborate national indicators based on a spatial data approach. So this is also a great transition to our next presentation, but basically in the metadata associated with decision 15.5, there's methodology for how each indicator should be calculated. For many of the indicators, the methodology references a spatial data set that should be used to calculate the indicator and provides methodology for how it should be used. So what we've tried to do in this guidance document and what my colleague Letty will talk through a little bit more in the next presentation is to help you to identify the data sets that should be used and point you to the methodology that can be used to calculate the indicator. So basically there's two stages here. First is the identification of the input data you'll use to calculate the indicator, and the second is following the methodology to actually calculate the indicator. I know that's a very technical response, but maybe we can go into a little bit more detail on that in my colleague Letty's presentation, and then take some further questions after that. And please keep the questions coming in the chat. We're happy to talk through them in more detail. So our next presentation will launch our UN Biodiversity Lab data collection on the monitoring framework for the Global Biodiversity Framework. And we'll also discuss in a little bit more detail about the data that is included there and some of the areas that I hinted at in my presentation. So for this, I will turn the floor over to my colleague, Leticia Cardozo, who is a technical senior consultant environmental at UNDP. Letty, you have the floor.
Thank you, Annie, and good morning and afternoon to colleagues joining us today. My name is Leticia Cardoso, and I am the Senior Technical Consultant for UNDP. Today, I will dive deeper to explore how spatial data can be used for the indicator calculation for the monitoring framework of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity. Next slide. To do this, I will build on the content my colleague Annie introduced to you today and focus in particular on what we know about how spatial data should be used for the indicator calculation based on the official CBD documents. I will also introduce how you can access this spatial data on our UN Biodiversity Lab Spatial Data Platform. You can see an outline of the topic I will cover today in this slide. Okay, all right. Let's start with an overview of the GBF monitoring framework data collection. Next slide. Thank you. As you all well know now, the GBF adopted at the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the CBD includes a set of 4 goals and 23 targets. The monitoring framework established in Decision 15.5 outlines headline, component, and complementary indicators to track progress at the national level. For this, spatial data will play a critical role for the monitoring progress towards the implementation of various goals and targets, since many indicators under the monitoring framework encourage spatial data for their calculation. Next slide. With the aim of supporting countries to take early action to identify and assess spatial data that can be used at the national level, we created the GBF Monitoring Framework data collection on EN biodiversity. Countries can use the GBF Monitoring Framework data collection to review indicators that requires spatial data for their calculation, and also to identify, view, and download the spatial data that are referenced in the indicator metadata. It is important to mention here that Decision 15.5 in Annex 1 states that if national indicators are not available, then the use of global indicators at a national level must be validated through appropriate national mechanism. Taking that statement into account, we offer this data collection for 2 purposes. First, to provide datasets that can act as a data standard that countries can use to evaluate their own national dataset. Again, and second, in circumstances where no national data exists, to provide global reference data that could be nationally validated to enable reporting against the associated indicator. Next slide. In addition to the GBF data collection available online on ENVL, the special datasets are also available in the guidance document that you already have the link in the chat. And also my colleague Annie introduced you before. The GBF data collection can specifically be found in Annex 2 of the document, and it is presented as tables, including the special datasets for headline and component indicators, and for complementary indicators on an ad hoc basis. As my colleague mentioned, Annex 2 additionally contains guiding questions to support countries to identify existing national datasets. Next slide. Now let's dive into the methods we use and the selection process for the inclusion of data in the collection. The UNBL team of experts assesses the monitoring framework to identify where special data can be used for indicator calculation. We use mainly two sources of information: the monitoring framework and the metadata associated to each indicator as of December 2023. And we plan to update this data collection based on future outputs from the ATEC, such as the 26 and COP16. In the following slides, I will give you more detail of this project. Next slide. Okay, let's start with the first source of information we use. In the associated decision 15.5, the COP established the monitoring framework, which includes a set of headlines, indicators that capture the overall scope of the goals and targets, and also a list of components and complementary indicators that allow a more detailed analysis. For our assessment, we use the list of headline components and complementary indicators listed within the decision 15.5, as you can see here on the right side of the screen. Next slide. Continuing to the second source of information, the UNBLT use the metadata associated with each indicator. With the information available as of December 2023, that is listed in the indicators for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework website. This website provides the most current metadata for the monitoring framework. On the right side of the screen, you can see what the website looks like and how the metadata information is available for goals and targets of each indicator. Our experts carefully analyze this metadata to determine if it encourages the use of special data for each indicator. We also use this metadata to identify the specific global reference dataset recommended for calculation of the indicator. Next slide. In the third and final stage of the process, we plan to review and update, if needed, our GBF data collection according to the release of new materials by the ATEC, decision reached during SWEPTA 26, and finally, from the outcomes decision at COP16. Next slide. Next, we conducted an analysis of the indicator metadata to identify indicators that recommend the use of special data for their calculation. We identified 4 types of indicators within the monitoring framework. These 4 types are special, likely special, non-special, and likely non-special. I would like to highlight here that this classification I mentioned is based on our experts' evaluation of the methodology presented in the official metadata. It is not an official classification stated within the GBF monitoring framework. So, How did we identify these four types of indicators? You can see our criteria in the table on the right side of the screen. This is also detailed in the technical guidance document that you already have the link to the chat. Next slide, please. So what did we find? First, as my colleague Annie shared, that 44% of headline indicators and 50% of component indicators have methodology encouraging the use of special data. What you are seeing here in this analysis broke it down by headline indicators in the left column and component indicators on the right column. The bars to the right of each goal or target show the numbers of indicators associated with each class I introduced in the last slide. So for example, if we look at goal A's headline indicators, we see it has one indicator that is special, one indicator that is slightly special, and two indicators that are non-special. So why is this important? Essentially, this analysis shows us that spatial data is critical to monitoring and reporting on national action to achieve the global biodiversity. Next slide. It also helps us to see for which grouping of targets spatial data is most important. For example, target 1 through 8 related to reducing threats to biodiversity all have at least one indicator that can be calculated using spatial data. In total, 61% of the headline and component indicators require or encourage the use of spatial data in this group. Next slide. More information about each goal and target of headline and component indicators falling within the four types of data that I presented before is available in Annex 1 of the technical guidance. The information is presented as a table that you can see here in the right-hand side of the slide. Next. After conducting our assessment to identify indicators that can be calculated using spatial data, our team worked to collect the data identified from the facial sources for each GBF indicator. Our goal here was to make this data easily accessible to parties in a single repository, our GBF monitoring framework data collection on ENG. To do this, we follow the steps you can see on this slide. Some of the data recommended in the official metadata have fully open licenses, which we could directly access. Other data require the permissions of the data provider to access and use. We therefore contacted the data owner to request permission to make the data available on ENG. We then processes all datasets, uploaded it to UNBL, and made it accessible to you through our GBF monitoring framework data collection, which we are excited to launch today. Next slide. Overall, the GBF monitoring framework data collection currently includes 44 datasets across the headline, component, and complementary indicators. We plan to add an additional 9 in the future after receiving permissions from data providers and completing the upload process. Next slide. So, how can parties access and use the GBF monitoring framework data collection? This data is freely accessible in 5 languages through our UNBL Special Data Platform. My colleague is dropping the links into the chat. To access the GBF data collection, you can follow the links provided, or you can also navigate to unbiodiversitylab.org, click Discover, and then click again the data collection option. You will see all data collections available on UNBL. Select the monitoring framework of the Kundin-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework data collection, and once you are in the page, you can review the background information about the collection. Next slide, please. Now, let's continue to explore the collection. If you scroll down past the background information, you will find the detailed information on the special data recommended to support indicator calculation, organized into headline, component, and complementary indicator tabs. In each tab, you find the relevant and organized information by goal and target. Select the goal or target indicator of your interest. Once selected, you can view the indicator list and information about the data recommended to calculate the indicator. Click on View Data to view the datasets on UNBL. Next slide. Alright, let's look at one target in particular to explore in more detail. For example, let's choose headline indicator 3.1 on coverage of protected areas and OECMs. Below the selected target, you can see the official wording of the target in the section 15.5. Then in the table, starting from the left side, you can first see the name of indicator 3.1. The next columns provide the links of the metadata for indicator, and the other columns provide more information on that specific target. In the next 3 columns, you can see a short description, frequency of data update, and resolution of global data. Finally, in the further right column, you can click on View Data on ENG. Next slide. After clicking on View Data, you can view the data on UNBL. Also, on UNBL, you can access the specific data layer metadata by clicking on the Layer Info tab located in the legend of the data. The layer info includes the data layer information, description, links to access the source publication, and to download the data. And that's it. You can access the special data relevant for calculation of all headline and component indicators in this data collection. We have also included the complementary indicators on an ad hoc basis. Next slide. All right. I would like to also note here, as my colleague Philip mentioned before, the ATEC just released their final report included updated metadata for the headline indicators in advance of SOSTA 26. You can see several of the relevant documents here, and my colleague are also dropping the links to these documents in the chat. Next slide. The first version of our data collection I shared today was based on the metadata provided as of December 2023. From our initial survey of the new documents, these are the key differences. For headline indicators, the ATEC has updated and provided the metadata information for all goals and targets covering the headline indicator. For component and complementary indicators, the ATEC has reviewed and updated the list of indicators by removing duplicate indicators and deleting references to indicators that do not exist. The ATEC also proposed moving some indicators from the complementary to the component indicator level. The ATEC is now also working in developing advice on the existing capacity gaps and needs related to the monitoring framework of the GBF. And this guidance document will include advice on filling temporal and spatial data gaps across the monitoring framework. So what does this mean for our GBF data collection? We will work to add any new data indicated and further align this data collection to the new metadata following outcomes of COP26 and COP16 decisions. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. Right, and I just quickly mention that we also use these websites to get more information to do our assessment, and you will have all this information on the chat and also on the presentations. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. I would like to take now a moment to pause and ask you all a couple of questions. We are going to use the Zoom poll again. All right, there you have the Zoom poll. Please add your answer. You can choose one or two or multiple options. Okay, I see four people. Okay, let's reach. Oh yeah, we got it to 50%. All right, I see the majority of the answer come from a combination of national and global data. Thank you for your answers. With that, I will say thank you to you all and turn it back over our facilitator. May happy to take any questions. Annie, over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Letty. We're really excited to launch all these products and share them with all of you today. This has been a huge amount of work for our team, so we're really excited to get them out and have countries start using them if they're helpful to you. So again, we have some time for questions. This is your chance. I know that there was a lot of detailed technical information in Letty's presentation. So please feel free to raise your hands, drop any questions into the chat. We're happy to talk through or go into any more detail about any of the content she presented. I'm not seeing any questions yet, so I see Dion Carrington has their hand up. Dion, please feel free to open your mic and ask your question directly.
Hi, good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
Great.
Okay, yeah. I joined a little bit late, maybe 20 minutes late, but so far I kind of liking what I'm hearing. But I have a few, I don't know if I should call it questions or a few points. And I think this is coming from, okay, so I'm based in Barbados. I'm the National Coordinator, the Project Associate for the Barbados project. And so much of what was discussed, global data sets. So keep hearing that global data set. And I kind of like the last poll that was carried out because the issue that I have with the with the global data set is that the global data set, I mean, it gives broad insight and you can use it to kind of get an idea of the global trends. But when you talk about small islands like Barbados, St. Lucia, Dominica, Antigua, the global data set, they are not very useful. So for example, an example would be the swamp in Trinidad. So I was using global data set to, do a survey, collect data, analyze the maps. And the global data set only covered half of the Caroni swamp in Trinidad. Now, would it be better to use national data sets? Yeah, of course. But then again, it goes back to what was just explained, methodologies that are being used to gather and collect data. The methodologies that would be used for a global data set um, might most likely not be used at a national scale because one, we may not have the technologies and the tools, right, to collect it in that way, or being small islands, you may simply just go to a community and meet persons with that local knowledge, ask the questions, and this is how you might collect. We may collect the collect data. No, so then what I want to, the last presentation mentioned pulling data and requesting data from data collectors. Are you all pulling data from regional databases here in the Caribbean instead of just using global? So data sets that has already been collected and collated here in the region on a database. Are we doing that so that when we go to I think the website, the Biodiversity Lab, right? Because I just pulled up Biodiversity Lab and I was looking at something related to Barbados. And I have about like 5 blocks that covers all of Barbados. Well, more, I mean, goes all out. It covers everything in Barbados. And I know for sure that is not accurate. That cannot be used. So are we looking to are you all reaching out to local data collectors and platforms here that in the region and use that, upload those data sets so that when countries want to pull information, calculate, they can get data sets that will paint a true picture of what is actually happening on the islands.
Yeah, so maybe I can provide an overview answer and then have Dee and Letty jump in there as well. So thank you very much. These are all really important points. And I think what is important about the monitoring framework for the new GBF is that it really emphasizes the use of national data where it's available at the national or regional level. At the same time, the methodology does provide some recommendations around global data that could help to fill the gaps. So with the guidance we produced, as well as with this data collection, we're trying to support countries to see what that global data is to better assess what national data might be better suited to your purposes at the national level. Unfortunately, we don't have the capacity to go, or the connections to go through and identify the national data that's available for all the countries in the project, but we've really set up these materials to try to help you to do that. And also to bring that data into UN Biodiversity Lab so you're able to access any global data that might help to fill gaps as well as the national data in one place. So that's kind of an overview answer. I don't know, Letty, Dee, if you have any points that you want to add in there in response.
Yes, I would like to add that our assessment also helps countries to identify which indicators within the goals and targets uh, require special data to make the calculation of that specific target. And as you mentioned, Annie, Also, we don't have the capacity to go to every country and collect the data. We collected the data from official sources that the metadata mention. So that's it.
I want to add a bit based on Annie and Letty's answer. First of all, thank you so much, Downey, for your insight. I think it's a really important point raised that global data has its limitations. It's not one size fits all for all countries, especially for small scale or island countries. And that's why even on the global reference data we listed in the guidance and in the collections, there are certain ways to work with the institute who produced these global data to switch with national data and to work on national or more local scale to calculate such indicators. We have also listed this information in our guidance doc where those institutes are willing to cooperate with countries to produce a more accurate national level data. And then later in my presentation, I would also introduce the support from UNBL to connect with national data and how you can manage and view national data together with global data. And hope that will provide some helpful way to engage with both national data and global data. All right, back to you, Annie.
Thanks. Dion, did that start to get at a response to some of your comments and questions?
Yes, it did. And I was in no way suggested to go out there and collect data because persons are always collecting data. I think it's just a matter of connecting and harvesting data from different platforms to include in UNBL.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great segue to our next presentation because Dee will talk about some of the ways to connect to existing national data repositories and national sources where we're unrolling a large string of new functionalities that are really designed to focus UNBL on national level support. And we'd love to hear feedback from all of you today about what Dee is about to present. So with this, I will give the floor over to Dee, and thanks so much for the questions and discussion. Dee, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Annie. Hi, everyone. I'm Dee Zhang. I'm a spatial planning and biodiversity expert with UNDP. It's a pleasure to be here and introduce the UN Biodiversity Lab and the technical support UNBL provides to the national monitoring systems for the Global Biodiversity Framework. Today, I will focus on section 3 of the technical guidance document that Annie just introduced earlier and explore the content in a bit more detail. To do this, first, I will provide a quick introduction to UNBL. Next, I will focus on the current and forthcoming features on UNBL that can support parties in their actions around the GBF. Finally, I will share some further resources and open up the floor to hear from your opinions and insights. All right, now let's start with what is UN Biodiversity Lab. UNBL is a free open source platform that provides high quality global geospatial datasets and analytical tools to support national actions on biodiversity. Best of all, it doesn't require any GIS expertise to use. UNBL was initially created 6 years ago, specifically to support parties in their commitments to the CBD. The first iteration of the platform led to an increase of 80% in the number of maps used between parties' 5th national report and the 6th national report to CBD. Now, following on the agreements of the Kwame-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, we're working to roll out a series of new features and functionalities to support parties around their planning, monitoring, and reporting on the GBF at the national level. As you can see on this slide, UNBL has a very long history of supporting parties in their commitments to the CBD. Our goal is to continue to provide resources that can be adapted to national context and support countries based on your existing capacity and needs. And we look to you to help guide us in this process. Now that I've provided a bit background on UNBL, let's turn to the core of my presentation for today, our current and forthcoming features that can support national actions around the GBF. As part of component 2 of the EAS project, each country is developing a plan for the national monitoring system based on national capacity and needs. We recognize that this process will be different in each country. Here, we are sharing these supporting functionalities of UNBL in case they're useful to your country to develop your national monitoring system. Here on this slide, you can see 6 key features of UNBL that are available or in development to support the national action around the GBF. The UNBL team is working with countries over the period of 2024 to 2025 to add new features to UNBL to support national actions with funding from Golden and Betty Moore Foundation. So today I will both share the features that are currently available for use and those we'll be developing and adding over the coming year. I know it seems a lot here, but don't worry, I'll walk through you each functionality in details now. All right, first let's take a look of the spatial data. We have several ways for you to access the geospatial data, and we'll start with the GBF monitoring framework data collection. You've already heard it in detail during Letty's presentation, so I wouldn't go further detail here, other than stress that this collection provides you with a one-stop shop to access, view, and download the global reference data for the indicator calculation recommended in the official metadata associated with Decision 15/5, the monitoring framework. We will ensure that this collection is updated following both Substa 26 and COP 16. Other than that, UNBL also offers data collections that can more broadly support planning and the monitoring around ecosystem restoration, protection, protected areas, and nature-based solutions for climate change. These global data can broadly support the GBF Target 2 on restoration, Target 3 on protected areas, and Target 8 on climate change. However, I want to stress here that these collections haven't yet been aligned strictly to the GBF monitoring framework indicators, but rather than provide an insight or a guide or guiding questions on what are the important features to consider when you're thinking about restoration or protection in your country. In addition to our data collections, you can also access over 600 global data layers on UNBL, focusing on biodiversity, carbon, sustainable development, curated by our team of experts to support national planning, monitoring, and reporting on across different subjects, from biodiversity conservation to ecosystem services, as well as climate change mitigation, also disaster risk reduction. And users all over the world can freely view, access, and download all these global spatial data on UNBL public platform. And we are very aware that in many cases, countries have much better national data for planning, monitoring, and reporting. And they are also required to use to prioritize the use of national data. So to enable the connection and integration with national data, I would love to introduce our second key functionality, the UNBL Secure Workspaces. Through the workspaces, countries are able to set up a secure working environment to connect with their own national data repositories, to upload national data and their own places of interest for view on the UNBL platform, or conduct analysis using the metrics and the tools available on this platform, along with accessing all the global data resources on UNBL that I just introduced. For example, here on my slide is the National Workspace of South Africa. They have uploaded a lot, like tons of national data used for their integrated spatial planning to identify priority areas in the country for biodiversity conservation, ecosystem restoration, and sustainable agriculture management. These national data can be visualized together with the global reference data of the GBF indicators to further support national reporting and decision-making process. Government policymakers and technical specialists can use a UNBL workspace to invite a community of users relevant to the development of a national monitoring plan. You can also upload national or subnational data sets or any data or places of your own to UN servers, or connect it to existing national repositories through API. This will enable all the relevant data, either national, subnational, or global level, to be consolidated in one location, so you can share or view or manage them together, and also ensuring automatic updates from the original source. From the poll we did during Annie's presentation, I learned this is one of your top votes and most relevant features you selected to connect with your own national repository. And UNBL has currently built this data connector with Google Earth Engine, Stack Service, Microsoft Azure, web server, and PGTEL server, etc. We'll also explore sharing UNBL's data through open access APIs and apply to the OGC standards. So we'll really build this connection with your national data and any data of your own. All right, and after you added your national data, the workspace provide a lot customized functionalities. For example, you can apply customized data tags for your national data to query them easily. For example, if there are a couple layers for target 1 and the other layers you uploaded for GBF target 2, you can tag them as target 1 or target 2, so it can easily find them next time. All right, that's a lot of information already. But to summarize, the UNBL workspace provides countries a lot more flexibility for them to manage and use their own national data. Then a very straightforward functionality, the third functionality, is to create maps on UNBL. You can use UNBL to visualize the data of your interest at national, subnational level, or global level to create customized maps for NBSUB or for national reports. Also from our poll just now, this is like the top ranked relevant feature you have selected. So I hope my introduction here is helpful for you to start exploring UNBL and identify the maps you want to create. Okay, feature 4. You can use UNBL to calculate dynamic metrics at country level or any subnational level through the workspace. And currently we offer 8 dynamic metrics to calculate these statistics, including biodiversity intactness, carbon density, and time-lapse data on the tree cover loss happen each year, as well as protected area coverage, human footprint changes, land cover, etc. So you can view those statistics on UNBL and also view the spatial maps in the map view, and also download these data for your research or reporting needs. And if you want to view more details of each layers we used for the calculation, you can click on the layer info page where we provide more detailed description of that data used, the original paper, citation, and license info, etc. But I do want to note here that several of the metrics are being updated currently in the backend. So if you go to the UNBL right now, you won't see all the 8 of them, but just a few that already been updated. But we are working on that, and we'll have all these metrics back up soon. All right, and then of particular relevance to develop national monitoring system for the GBF. In the coming years, in 2024 to 2025, UNBL will add the ability to view and calculate headline indicators if the indicator requires spatial data in the calculation. And this feature will largely enable countries to view and download the headline indicators calculated for your country using the global reference data. And through the UNBL workspace, you can also calculate these indicators with your national data and the official national boundaries. So this feature could serve as a component of a national monitoring system for the global biodiversity framework. Next, and the 5th functionality, I'd like to introduce our forthcoming ELSA tool. This is an integrated spatial planning tool on UNBL. The headline indicator and other indicators included within each national monitoring plan are intended to guide implementation of national biodiversity strategies and action plans, as well as to monitor progress towards national targets. In addition, Target 1 calls for integrated spatial plan for actions across all targets. So to support countries in this work, the UNBL partnership is building on extensive work at the national level to map essential life support areas. This ELSA tool will enable countries to use UNBL to create a prioritized spatial plan to show where actions to protect, manage, and restore nature in the country can lead to the best outcomes across all the GBF targets, indicators, and as well as other relevant international conventions such as UNFCCC and SDGs. You can see a proof of concept version of the ELSA tool here. This is currently available for 3 countries, but we will update and release the new version that open for all the countries to access and use next year in 2025. In this ELSA tool, countries can run a spatial planning analysis with just a few clicks on the screen and view a rapid results map on the most important areas in your country to implement biodiversity conservation, ecosystem restoration, and other nature-based actions. This web tool is very easy to operate, and also no GIS expertise are needed to use. And it can feed back the result map in real time. Last but not least, to support mainstreamed and efficient monitoring and reporting for countries, we will also scoop and create connections to other relevant platforms, including the data reporting tool for multilateral environmental agreements, target tracker, and the CBD online reporting tool. All right, so above are the key features I want to highlight to support national actions around the GBF. This is a whole lot of information again. I hope the 3 of us are not overwhelming you today, but now I'd like to take a moment to pause and ask for your feedback. Now that you've heard all the presentations about the support we provide through this guidance and through UNVL, we would love to learn which is most relevant for your country and your work. So now we're gonna launch another poll here. You should see a box popping up on your screen, and feel free to select one or multiple actions. Now I will give everyone a moment to add in their responses. Please engage with us. We are very eager to learn from your perspective. Meanwhile, you can start thinking about any questions you might have and raise to the panel, and I will open up the floor right after this poll. All right, I'm seeing the responses coming in. Great. Ray can share the result for now. I think the top answer is to identify national spatial data for the indicator calculation, as well as build capacity to combine national and global data to use at national level. So yes, those are all very important aspects, and we have learned from you how important it is to prioritize the use of national data and really enhance such analysis or support at country level. All right, so last but not least, I want to share an easy way to help you get involved with UNVL today. First, we are looking for text users as we develop the new functionalities I mentioned. If you're interested in providing your input and feedback, you can share your email in the chat and we will contact you for test users. And secondly, you can also sign up for an account on UNVL so you can access more features such as clip and download the data for your country. And thirdly, if you're interested in creating your own UNVL workspace, feel free to send me an email with your requests. I also want to share that we have a micro course available for UNVL that has introduced all the functionalities I just mentioned, as well as some background knowledge in spatial data and international conventions. And this has been updated through the EAS project. I'm going to ask my colleague to share the links in the chat. This is available in multiple languages as well. With that, I will say thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions you have, and I'll turn it back to Annie, our facilitator.
Great, thank you so much, Dee. The floor is open for questions. Please, again, feel free to raise your hand or put any questions into the chat. I'll also just echo Dee here that with UN Biodiversity Lab, we're working over the coming year or so to build out these features to really support national level use of the platform using national data for national needs and purposes. So we'd love to hear from you about what would be helpful for you, what you think about these new functionalities, all of that. So please don't be shy in reaching out to us. We're really trying to make sure that this process is country-led and country-oriented as we build out these new developments. So let's see, the floor is open. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. Feel free to ask any questions to Dee or across any of the presentations we've had today. I'll just give a couple more moments. Maybe while we're waiting, or I guess we're getting pretty close to the end of the session. So I think if there's no questions from our participants, we can go ahead and move into the closing remarks. If any questions do come up, please feel free to drop them into the chat. We'll also share our email addresses in the slides coming up. And please don't be shy to reach out to us over email. All right, So Alexi, if you could just go to the next slide, please. So as we're wrapping up the session, I just want to provide an overview of the Component 2 materials that are available to all of you through the EAS project. This includes all of the products that are noted on this slide. I won't go into detail about them now, but we will be sending an e-blast with descriptions of each product as well as all of the relevant links in English and in languages in the next couple of weeks following this webinar. Next slide. All right. Before concluding this meeting, I would like to express thanks to the GEF for providing funds for this project, as well as to all of our great partners at UNDP, UNEP, UNEP WCMC, and CBD for all the joint work in this project. And with that, we've reached the end of today's session. I think I have one more slide here. So I want to thank all of the presenters who shared information with us today. You can see all of our email addresses on this slide. We'll be happy to respond to any questions as I noted. Also, you'll be able to find all the recordings, presentations, and the Q&A document of previous webinars in this series on our webinar webpage, which my colleague is dropping into the chat. We'll also reach out with further information by email as soon as we have more information about the next webinar in this series. Finally, at the end of the session, you'll receive a quick survey, which will take about 1 minute to respond. We'd really appreciate your feedback to assist us in continuing to offer good quality webinars on the deliverables for the Early Action Support Project. So with that, I will say thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. I know everything's busy and we really appreciate you taking the time. We look forward to continuing to work with you on this important project. Thanks so much and have a good rest of your day or evening wherever you are.